Hello, we're just getting started. Thanks for coming on in. I'm all ready for Daphne today because I have my jean jacket on here. I'm here with Source Booksellers, and we are a nonfiction niche, but we love good fiction. And these stories, and this story in particular, is a page turner and an absolute joy to read. So we're celebrating the release of Daphne, Josh Moellerman's new book, which came out on Tuesday, and we are delighted to be in the release week celebrating this page turner. If you are familiar with any of his books, you know that they're gripping and they keep your attention and you can't stop reading them. But if you're unfamiliar with him, I just want to do like a little introduction. So Josh Moellerman is a New York Times best-selling author and one of the two singer-songwriters for the rock band High Strung. His debut novel, Bird Box, was an inspiration for a Netflix film, and the sequel, which you all should read, is Mallory. We are delighted that both of the authors tonight are Michigan authors, and they have just, I think, one thing in common. They both have a book that has lead women in their books. So today, Josh will be having a conversation with Zigzag Claiborne, who is an author of The Brothers Jetstream, Letheson, Neon Lights, Historical Inaccuracies by All Our Violent Guides, and the small but powerful In Quiet Spaces. You can find him easily on the web at writeon.com. And so I'm going to ask them to join me.
Hello.
So thank you so much for letting Source Booksellers be a part of this release week.
Oh man, thank you for hosting and for having me and having us. Yeah.
Awesome. So I want to show the Afro Puffs are the antenna of the universe. I introduced Zigzag, and we are celebrating Daphne tonight. Yes. And so I'm going to step back, and I've got some questions for later, but for now, please talk about Daphne.
Yes. Well, first things first, let us say thank you to Source. Thank you to Josh. Matter of fact, as a Michigan writer, I'm raising up my mug of Rock and Rye in here.
Oh, nice.
Breaking out the Fago. Congratulations, sir.
Thank you.
So let's anytime authors start to talking, the first question is always pantser or plotter. So let's get that one out of the way. Which one are you?
Could not be more pantser than I am, except there was one time. So I've written 36 books now, and there was one of them that I knew was going to be a giant one, like a 300,000 worder, like a giant one. And for that one, I was like, listen, man, you need some scaffolding. You need a skeleton, because if you get, 300 pages deep and you're only a third of the way through and you don't know exactly where you're going, this could go wrong. So yeah. I did outline for one book, and I got to tell you, and I'll ask you if you're a pantser or plotter. I got to tell you, it was nice. It was nice to actually know the next morning, like, yeah, now I'm doing this scene. Now I'm doing this scene. That was the only book, though. All the rest have been completely pantser. What about you?
Same, pantser all the way. I mean, it's okay. I started off plotting way back when, and then I started pantsing, and I've stuck with pantsing. Although I'm working on, just like you, I'm working on something now where it's like, there's too many moving parts for this, even for me. And I'm used to doing a hell of a lot of moving parts and stuff. But this one, I need to step back on. Because I had a friend of mine who said that, I mean, she's a wife and mother, and she's just got so much going on, but she's a writer as well. She's like, I plot everything because I don't have the time to sit down and just think about what to do. When I get to the page, I need to be hitting it running. And ever since she told me that.
Okay. So whenever I talk about writing Bird Box, because it was a real thrilling experience for me, I would wake up at 7 a.m., make coffee, write from about 8 till noon, which, by the way, it seems like every writer is a 3 or 4 hour block, no matter who you are or something. I don't know what that is, but I would like to learn more about that.
That's the butt cheeks, man.
Yeah. That's what, all bus drivers and writers, and like you can only go out 3 hours. So I every night though, by the end of the night, I knew what I was going to write the next day. And there is something, so it was by the seat of my pants, but it was also like your friend said, to wake up and hit the ground running was really nice, rather than like, oh boy, okay, what are we doing here? But I think the excitement of the pantser, for anyone listening and maybe writers even, is a sense of reading it as you're writing it, of experiencing it as it's happening, surprising yourself, like, oh man, that's a good idea that I would never have thought of if I sat and worked this out. And also, oftentimes when you're done, a scene that maybe you thought was a transition or maybe even a little boring, maybe it's just two characters meeting and you felt like it was like insignificant versus like a centerpiece moment. But that moment, that's everyone's favorite moment. This like tender little moment that you might have just walked right over in an outline of sorts.
Yeah. And, for people out there who aren't familiar with these terms, even though I'm sure they picked it up by now, tell us what a pantser is and what a plotter is.
Plotter is you outline, you have the plot lined out, you have the series of events, and the pantser is you go by the seat of your pants.
There we go. That's it. That is it. And our most famous pantser is probably Willie Shakespeare, because he was just making stuff up as he went along. So.
Is that, man, do we know that? Is that true? Was he just like rolling?
Shakespeare was just rolling. When he wasn't flat out drunk, Shakespeare was just rolling with it.
Oh, that's cool.
It helped the fact that a lot of this, we think of him as this, really original guy, but a lot of this stuff that he was doing, he was just recycling from everybody else. So he didn't have to plot that much.
There's a member of my band. I'm in a band called The High Strung, and the other singer-songwriter, I'm one, and Mark is one. And Mark is like, like a Shakespearean professor. The guy, and he knows everything. I watched that new Coen Brothers, and I called him up. I'm like, okay, so what did this mean? He's like, well, that depends. Do you mean the original stage production, or do you mean like how it's interpreted? I was like, wow, this Mark's the real deal. And it's got me interested in now hearing you talk about him too, because I have only read Shakespeare in, when we were supposed to, quote unquote.
Right.
I've never dove in though. And between you right now and Mark on the phone and seeing that movie, and maybe it's time for me to do that.
Yeah, when you read him for fun, you kind of see this dude was just doing it. He was like having a ball with words, almost like he was Dr. Seuss of the time.
Yeah, in that movie, I said to Mark, I was like, I didn't even know like toil, boil, whatever. I was like, this is all like, he's like, yeah, that he, Joel Coen didn't like add those words. Those are all his words. And like, it was like Dr. Seuss-ish. It was like playful, colorful, like at times, obviously at times super heavy, but at other times, like really like nursery rhyme-esque. I was like, wow, this dude. Yeah.
Dude was having fun. And that's one of the best things about a creative life, is we get to have fun with what we're doing. And I can tell that you have a lot of fun with what you're doing, because you do not limit yourself to just one lane in your writing. There's almost a psychological approach to your writing. And I don't know if you see it that way yourself, but I kind of get that vibe, because you jump from, let's say, Bird Box, then you're doing Unburied Carol, which is, a fantastical Wild West kind of weird thing. And then you jump again to, what was the one I wrote down? Because the title just jumped out at me, Black Mad Wheel. And I'm like, number one, just those cool ass titles, Black Mad Wheel, Bird Box, Unburied Carol, they speak to a sense of fun when you approach the project. Do you get, when you're doing it, is that what you're feeling?
Yeah, 100%. It's weird. I think that being in a band and being a fan of bands that have variety to them, whether it's, I don't want to just say ballads or rockers. I mean, like, acoustic songs, full electric songs, dirty songs, slow songs, pretty songs. All my favorite songwriters are all over the map, and it's still the same, like, the same guys or girls doing it, right? And I think that I almost subconsciously have approached books the same way. Like, it's okay. Like, imagine, so Bird Box is your first book, and none of the characters can look. What if then your next book you're like, now they can't listen, or now that, you know what I mean? Like, no. Like we did that. Now let's move on, right? And I think not intentionally, but I'll see it in a lot of reviews, like, what's the right word? Each book is nothing like the one before it. And rather than that being different for different sake, it's more what you're saying. It's like having fun with it and not being afraid to be elastic with it, not being afraid to play an acoustic song in an electric band, not being afraid to sing pretty when you normally yell, whatever that is, it's still going to be you. And I mean, except for maybe the stand-up comedian, I can't think of another medium than the author where your voice is going to come through no matter what you do. You don't have the awesome drummer to not hide behind, but to help you. You don't have the awesome cinematographer of maybe a director. It's just you and words. And so with that in mind, if you know it's going to be you and your voice no matter what, why not stretch?
Yeah, why not give somebody a book about a serial killing 7 foot tall ghost wearing Kiss makeup? Get us into your mindset of how did you decide this is the next book I want to do? Talk to us about Daphne.
So I had a list of, and you probably have this too. I kind of have like a running list of ideas, right? And I had like a list of what I thought would be a series of novellas. And Daphne felt like, in context of to be followed by 4 or 5 novellas that were nothing like her, it felt like kind of like a perfect sort of like a lead off track for an album or something. Okay. I wrote her, and she was a little bit longer than I expected. It was like 30,000 or 35 or something. And that's, for a novella, we're starting to like encroach on novel territory now, right? And I sent all those novellas into to Del Rey, and my editor wrote me back saying, no, Daphne should be your next novel. You should go give this one a rewrite and actually look at like what you have here. And like, there's a few little, address Carla McGowan a little more, address this a little bit more, and you have like a novel length story here. And she's right. It was one of the easiest, because I don't know if you've ever tried this to expand a short story into a novel, or you can sometimes feel like you're like ballooning the thing or bloating the thing, right? Yeah. And there was none of that. She was 100% right. I went through it and I was like, oh, this part needs some more of this. And oh, this part needs some more. And by the time I was done, it was like 70,000 words. I was like, oh, right. Trisha was, wow, this was a novel. And even yesterday, or was it yesterday? 2 days ago, when the book came out, I wrote her like a thank you email about that. Like, you saw this, I didn't see this. And so Daphne originally was for me, like I'm saying, like that opening track. And there was something about this like giant 7 foot, essentially Daphne represents, and before I say this, typically I think an author will say like, oh, it's let the reader interpret it how they will. Is Bird Box about madness? Is Bird Box about blah, blah, blah. Daphne is about anxiety. It is 100% about anxiety. And she represents a coming panic attack. There's no hiding that. I can't sit here and be like, oh, that's not what I meant. That's totally what I meant. So to open that writing session, that series of novellas with this sort of giant looming anxiety on its way, felt like an ideal like opener. And then Trisha turned it into a novel, or told me to turn it into a novel.
It sounds like she was, like you said, absolutely right. And okay, your love of things 80s, that shows through.
Yeah.
Basketball. I'm hearing that you're a huge b-ball fan.
Oh,
so
yeah.
That in there. Yeah. I mean, it seems like all the elements in this book, even if she hadn't mentioned, this needs to be a novel, eventually this would have turned out to be a novel.
Yeah, no, I know. Right. Well, have you, do you have stuff like that where you're like somebody, an editor or a friend or someone
Mhm.
says something and you're like, how did I not see that? I'm literally
Oh,
sitting here with
yeah.
it all day. And I
Yes.
did not see this. Yeah, it's a crazy, that's part of the fun of writing though, isn't it? Right. Because it almost is like you're making a Rorschach test and whatever somebody else sees or whatever, you then see that.
Yeah.
Basketball. So I've tried my hand at like the first novel I ever wrote. There was a gym class with basketball in it. In the second book I tried to write was called Track and Field, and it was about a track team that essentially runs further than they should and encounter this weird place that leads to all this stuff.
Mm.
So I've been always like wanting that combination of like team and sports and horror without it being like, like goofy, like Mad Magazine or eerie,
Right.
like I've always wanted that, but I didn't have it till Daphne. I needed that sort of that center, like a legit scary centerpiece for this to work, and I just didn't have it before.
Yeah. And you made that great point about team, because one of the things I noticed in horror, and I don't consider myself a horror writer, but I've seen enough and read enough, but true horror, a lot of the times, the lasting horror comes from not what's happening to protagonist A, but what's happening to everybody else that protagonist A has to deal with,
Yeah.
And that's where you get the team in there. And so everything just dovetailed perfectly for this book.
And it's real hard to avoid like police or detectives in a story like this, because if something's happening to, as you're saying, everyone around the protagonist, well, aren't we all going to like call for help, right?
Right.
So unless we're stranded on an island or whatever, so then because of that, the detective McGowan enters the book. But when she enters, I said to myself, okay, let's keep the theme of this anxiety. So you know what, McGowan has anxiety also. So Kit, our protagonist, does. Daphne is panicked. The detective, she's freaking out about not being able to solve this. She's not cool. She's not badass. She's totally freaked out and like trying to help a girl who's totally freaked out. And everyone in the entire city is freaked out. So I imagine if somebody randomly took a vacation to Sam Hatton that day, they would feel it in the air. They'd be like, is this nervous to you?
Yeah. And I love that you went into it, writing it with intent like that, and not letting the characters know you're in a genre piece. That it goes back that sense of reality. Like you said, if one person's uneasy, the other person's going to be uneasy, and it's just going to be this blooming effect.
Yep.
As opposed to, you got the sheriff coming in, I know what to do. No, they're going to be freaked out too.
No, you're totally right. And it's like, that's even, the idea is like, you don't think about Daphne, don't think about her. And if you think about her too much, she's going to come. I mean, it's exactly what you're saying. If I'm thinking about her all the time, or let's say thinking about something all the time, my fiance is going to feel it. And we're both going to get freaked out. Yeah. And then if her mom came over, she's going to feel that we're freaked out. Now we're all freaked out. Now we're all thinking about Daphne. Exactly. And meanwhile, in a sense, Daphne has arrived because we're all freaking out.
Exactly. I love that. Yes.
Yeah.
Now, without giving too many spoilers here about Daphne, because that's what everybody wants to talk about. What did you want readers to go into this expecting, and what did you want them to come away from with? I know that's kind of a awkwardly phrased, but
no, I understand. I think that so because, as we were talking earlier about the elasticity of the writer, right? There are moments in my career so far, and it's only been 8 years long. Bird Box came out, 8 years ago. I do have moments where I'm like, I almost want to remind either myself or the scene that, like, hey, I can throw a fastball horror story also. And whereas Unburied Carol is stretching, Ghoul in the Cape is super expansive. And there is this side of it that's like, just wants to throw a fastball down the middle again. And that doesn't mean it's such a straight story, but I just want to write a horror story. And I wanted Daphne to be that. Just like I wanted On This the Day of the Pig to be that. I wanted it to be like, This is squarely horror. We can talk about what Carol is. We can even talk about what Bird Box is and Ghoul in the Cave. Daphne's a horror story. And I wanted that dark red curtain apart. I wanted the fog present when you open the book. I wanted the lighting established like beforehand. What I want people, what I would love people to walk away with is considering what these topics we're talking about, anxiety and panic. And, it's funny because we did a reading 2 nights ago, the launch party. And like, talk about freaking yourself out. You got to get up in front of 100 people and talk about panic and anxiety. It's not like you're getting up to like talk about, it's like you're literally backstage freaking out to go on stage and talk about freaking out. And that struck me when I was backstage. I'm like, dude, next time write a book about something. Oh man.
I know that is way too meta right there. It's like,
Yeah, that's too meta for our minds to handle.
But when no, go ahead, please.
So that would be, the ideal thing is that I think that every horror author has a, no matter how lofty it is, what you're trying to write, you want to actually scare someone. Mm-hmm. And no matter how meaningful or devastating or whatever it is, there's also a fantasy that something you wrote could be like a Halloween costume. Yeah. And like, no matter the loftiest horror author would be like, ooh, I would love to see a mask at like Halloween USA of something I wrote, right? Yeah. And I think Daphne, I'm not saying that I expect to see her at Halloween USA, but I think that Daphne, she did that for me. And she came to me like fully formed. The book's about basketball. Well, why don't we make her a center? Why don't we make Daphne 7 feet tall? Did she play basketball? Hell no. But what if she did? She, I bet you couldn't have scored on Daphne, and give her like, but wait, this is a sports team, but Daphne smells like booze and smoke. Like, oh, for like a sports team to like an athlete in high school to be around someone like that, that's extra creepy. And like, she's into like hard rock, and these girls are into like modern music now. And like everything about Daphne is like no one they would want to be around, Yeah. And she came to me fully formed, fully denim. You can almost imagine, the girls say kiss makeup, but maybe just picture more like some sort of glam makeup upon the face of like a bloated corpse.
Yeah, which is scary as hell by itself. Now, I mean, for me, there are places I will not go when I write, especially if it's something that's horror, like not so much the topics, but like Bloody Mary, for instance, which kind of has a an overtone in Daphne. To this day, I will not look in a mirror at night. I will not do. I'm a grown man, but I will not look in a mirror at night. Is there anything that you have written where you pulled yourself away because you knew it was going to keep you up?
Oh no! I have so much to say about what you just said. If that ever happens, oh my God, there was one time. Which book was it? Oh, it's the one I just the one I just wrote. I finished it like a month ago. And I got up from the desk. I like left the room. I had to like get out of the office for a second. And Allison, who my fiance is always trying to like scare me around the house and stuff. And I went out there and I was like, just kind of standing there in the living room. She's like, what? And I'm like, I just wrote a scary scene. But again, for a guy like me and my circle of friends, that is like, that's like a badge of honor. You're like, you're like, okay, I did it. I freaking did it. All right. And then you kind of shake it off and you go back in. But then there are subjects, like actual subjects, like I can't imagine myself writing about like realistic brutality or realistic sometimes I think about, I'll be watching like a true crime doc or something. And I'm like, someone actually got hurt here.
Right.
And it messes with me. I'm like, wait a minute, like, yes, this is interesting. And how is it solved? And I'm watching it, but there's a time that's like, yeah, this is not the same thing as what I'm doing. Yeah. And I'm not, besmirching anyone that does. I just, for me, that I almost feel like violence and sex are already knives. And if you can cut me with something else, that isn't violence or sex, if you can cut me with something else, then you pulled off something special as a horror author.
Yeah, I agree with that entirely. I mean, there are certain things like humor and horror are the two hardest to get right because you have to go in it as a surgeon. You just go in there. with a scalpel with your eyes closed. You gotta be really precise with it. And you go in there with your surgical smock on and you get it done.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think of those in a similar way when someone says they get too scared in horror movies. I'm like, oh my God, you're the perfect audience. You have a sense of horror. Just like I laugh in a comedy, I have a sense of humor. And I get scared in horror movies, I have a sense of horror. You should be, you're the one I want reading this book. You actually get scared.
Yeah, exactly. Now you mentioned your music. Does your music ever cross over into your literary life and vice versa? Like, have you slid the band into any stories?
Kind of. So earlier, before we got on, everyone, we were talking about St. Clair Shores and that I lived out there for a minute. And I recorded an album on my own when I lived out there. And it was kind of like a series of short horror stories. So that was the first time that I ever saw them really intersect.
Okay.
The actual band themselves, Black Mad Wheel, is about a band in 1957, Detroit, who have this one hit. They're at the sort of the, early days of rock and roll. And they have this one instrumental hit. And I wouldn't say I based anything on any of like the personality traits of my bandmates, but I would love to do that. And I think I will eventually. But little things like the songwriter wasn't the star musician. And I feel like that's true in our band. Mark and I write the songs, but Chad and Derek are like, and Steven are like light years ahead of us in musicianship. So little things like that, like the dynamics of the band and how they work together and the democratic nature of the band. It wasn't one guy runs the show. Not, we're all like best friends in the High Strung. So those elements for sure. I would love, but dude, it has to be such a good idea to actually because it's one of those things, and basketball is like this too, where the potential for silliness is so ripe. Like basketball and horror, you're like, oh boy, I'm picturing like Bill Walton as like a zombie, like running up there. I'm like, no, we gotta be right. And and then same thing with the band, like rock music. So when we strike this one evil chord, everyone turns into demons. That sounds fun right now, but it's got to be a really good idea, And I don't. One time we were on the road, and the bass player Chad said, because we were on the road for years. And this is before Facebook and cell phones, really. And he was like, we could be serial killers and no one would ever have any idea. Like we're traveling from like town to town and no one have any, really anyone even knew we were here. Nobody knows where we are right now.
Hello.
Some little light went on in my head. I was like, oh, that's interesting. But I still haven't coalesced with the full, how do you link up your band with a book thing?
But you know what? I'm seeing the title, and with apologies to Paul McCartney, Band on the Run.
Yeah,
that's it right there.
Band on the Run. There's like sirens on the cover. But the bigger thing for me, the bigger link for me between and I wonder if you feel this way too, between music and writing is the rhythm of it. And so in our band, Chad, the bass player, he's like our lead guitar player, and Steven. But I've always been I'm at home with the drummer. And when I'm writing a book, I always look for that, like whatever the beat is. It doesn't always have to be
right.
But whatever it is, I want whatever we start at or whatever the groove we find, the whole way I want it to be there. And I think Daphne has it. I know Bird Box had it, where you can almost imagine playing like one note on a synthesizer, one that goes through the entire story and maintains that sort of tension, right? So that is absolutely something I've learned like from the band, as well as we were talking before, the like elasticity, the acoustic versus this and this and this. Yeah.
Yeah, because in a way, a book is basically a concept album, and
yes,
as the readers going through, they need to hit those tempos and beats and get the lulls, and then by the end they're doing the anthem rock. So yeah, I feel you on that.
Man, I am quoting you and posting that when we're done here. That a book is basically a concept album. I've never heard someone say that before, and that's exactly what it is.
Good.
And it seems like it takes the same amount of energy or focus, like to write a book, as you know, takes a freaking minute, and all the rewrites and everything. And to make like an actual concept album would be an endeavor, right? Or like a film. And so, yeah, wow, that is interesting. Yeah, that's cool.
Now, would it be okay if we asked you to just read the first paragraph from the book? Are you cool with that?
Yeah. Yes, I have it right here.
And then in a few minutes, we'll take some questions from the audience. So
Okay.
This will get them ready and eager for you.
Daphne, everybody. And this is Sam Hatton High School, where the girls in the story go to school. A tie game with summer league rivals, friends and family in the bleachers. The ball in your hand at the free throw line is no time to ask the rim a question. Yet that's what Kit Lamb does, even as she lifts the ball, elbow in, left hand supporting, even as it seems like nothing could chop her focus and nothing has yet, not in this game. Not even when she made the and one that led to this moment, a question for the rim. Will Daphne kill me? Kit almost laughs as she releases the ball. There's a hitch in the shot, to be sure. She's embarrassed of her own question, even if nobody else could have heard. The ball leaves her fingertips. The gym is haunted house quiet, but the question remains suspended in her head, and with it, the image of the woman Daphne. Kit's own idea of her, the horrid centerpiece of Natasha Monska's Sam Hatton myth, Daphne in denim, Daphne with patches, Daphne the madwoman who smells of smoke and whiskey. The ball goes through the net, so that's a yes.
Nice. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, and I see here Allison's back.
Okay, I'm gonna help with questions. So we have some questions in the queue, and I'll leave my question for last. Okay. Jeffrey wants to know, when you appeared on the bleeding page, you said that you can usually pick out the little idea that a story grew out of. What was the little idea that Daphne grew out of?
Wow, that Jeffrey, great question. We were talking about how when you're reading a book, you know, I almost, and I for some reason I imagine the two of you are in a similar place where I'm not really thinking this is good or bad or ranking, or like, I don't think of books in that way. I think of it more like, why was this written? Like who is the person that wrote this? What is the time they put into this? And I feel like in any book I'm reading, even if I'm not like crazy about it, I can locate like, this is the heart of it. This is the nugget. This is the reason, the start of it, the idea by which all of it all blossomed. And so for Daphne, again, it was the idea of a coming panic attack. There's no question about it. But she, you know, I feel like I've been looking for that forever or something, in a way, like, how would you write a novel all about anxiety in the right way? And it was almost like I looked up and she was just like standing there. And I was like, oh, you are Panic. Okay. Maybe I needed to get more nervous in my life before I wrote Daphne. Maybe I was too cool before.
Too cool.
Yeah, that must be what it is.
So Justin is from Kitchener, Ontario, Canada, not far from us. Was this book always going to be called Daphne, or did you have other titles in mind?
Interesting. When I first wrote it, it was called Daphne Summer of Blood, which again is a little ridiculous. But like I said, I was thinking in terms of a fastball with this one at first. And then I was like, okay, let's get rid of that silly parenthetical, whatever. Yeah, it was. But then when I finished Daphne, I had realized that I had a couple books like Mallory, Daphne, Pearl, and I'm like, whoa, why do I have so many like proper names suddenly? Like this kind of came out of nowhere for me. Because like I told you, I've written 36 books, but I think of the 11 that have come out, like 3 or 4 have names. And I'm like, no more names. I don't even get no more, no matter if it's the coolest name ever, no more name titles. So yeah, it was Daphne from the start, but no more proper name titles.
James is asking, for someone who hasn't read your work, which novel would you recommend as the best example of what a Josh Malerman book is?
I don't know. Daphne, Bird Box, A House at the Bottom of a Lake. A lot of people seem to be into A House at the Bottom of a Lake. That one's two teenagers on a first date take out a canoe, which is a kind of a cool first date. And they're way out in this lake and they pass above like the very like top of a house. They see like an entirely submerged house below them. And what self-respecting teenagers who are just falling in love wouldn't check that out? So it becomes a summer of checking out this house that's, sunk. And what fun would this book be if nothing else lived there already? So House at the Bottom of the Lake seems to be a good intro. But I mean, Bird Box is probably a safe bet. And thanks for asking.
And Mark is asking, says, hi, Josh. I'm picking up my copy of Daphne on Saturday. Can't wait. Have you any plans to release a collection of your short stories? I'm not going to say anything.
Well, I don't really have. So the next book in line is called Spin a Black Yarn, but Spin a Black Yarn is a collection of novellas, which Daphne was originally going to be part of. I don't, I've never. I don't know if Zigzag, if you think in this way or not, but I'm like the novel is home. And then at some point I was like I had written something like 14 novels before I even wrote one short story. And then I started writing short stories and loving it. And I felt like some really worked and some I was like, okay, whatever, but like not whatever. But now there are like 35, 40 or something of them. And so suddenly I'm like, is there a book here also? Maybe I don't know. I don't know if I'm quite at that spot yet or something. I think that if I was gonna, because we think about like the collected short stories of like authors we have all read, and it's like them at their best, It's like we're talking the top shelf. So I don't know if I've reached that spot with the short stories. I think that there's it can be done, but I would just want to make sure that it's really good or something.
So would Goblin are those novellas?
Those are novellas, yeah. Yep, Goblin is a collection of like 6 novellas that all take place in the city of Goblin in one night.
Is Goblin still up at Fangoria, was it?
I don't know.
I think I saw that they were online there, but I could be wrong. But that's a good place to check.
Okay, Matthew. Thank you, Matthew Wallace. It's well to know by your fans that you wrote 14 books before getting Bird Box published. You mentioned that you have written 36 to date. Are you more eager to get your older books published or getting newly written materials published? Interesting question.
Great question, right? Because I think some people would see the stuff they wrote before Bird Box coming out as, I don't know, a warm up or getting their chops or whatever. But it wasn't like that for me. From the word go, it was like, I mean, as we all know, any rough draft can be fixed, right? So even if those earlier books are not as well written, well, okay, then let's go fix them. Because the ideas were, as we were talking about before, the ideas were inspiring enough to write an entire novel and, that kind of thing. So then it's kind of both, because I haven't stopped writing about 2 books a year since Bird Box came out, but I'm only releasing about 1 a year, right? So that backlog is growing. Now there are 25 novels in this office that haven't come out yet. Okay, but meanwhile, don't I want to write the next one in a few months? So I'm not necessarily the kind of guy that thinks like, how they say that a lot of artists think that their newest is their best or whatever. Again, I don't really think in terms of best and worst and ranking and stuff like that. I think of it more like this. What should follow Daphne? Like as if this was an album. Like, so Daphne was this mood. Do we want to keep this mood or do we want to like stretch a little here? Do we want a few like this element in a row, or is now a great time to be like, take a sharp right turn and play an acoustic song instead? And I don't know that answer yet. So the answer to the question though is they both are vying for room in my head all the time. The older ones and I mean they're not older ones. The first ones and the newer ones are constantly vying for attention.
Excellent. Now I can ask my question. No. um, what I liked was that Daphne is like a female villain.
Yeah.
When we think of these, popular thought about, even serial killers, you think on TV now it's like a patient or Freddy or something like that. Was that a goal? Did you have a goal where you're like, that's it, I'm gonna make a female serial killer? Because I know Tom Carr, he wrote The Blood in the Mitten. It's like it's crimes in Michigan. And there was a long time ago, a little lady named Mary, and she would kill people to go to their funeral. And I don't know if it's a true story, but it's in his book, Blood in the Mitten. But that was the only time I had read about a serial killer, a female serial killer.
Yeah. That sounds awesome, by the way. I want to read Blood in the Mitten now. That's a great idea, what you just described. At some point, it would be impossible for me not to have started seeing her as like a Jason figure, because Daphne she's not beating you at chess. She's like a blunt object. She doesn't even knock on the door. She walks into the house, walks up the stairs. You're like trying to get into your bedroom. She walks through your bedroom door. She grabs you, you're done. So yeah. She is like a blunt object. So it's impossible for me not to have thought of at that point, like Jason, Michael Myers, Leatherface, those kind of just like purely, one thing I want, no, that's a spoiler. I'm not going to say that. I'm not going to say that, but I don't know if you would set out like I want to write a female Jason or something, but once a little into the book, it would be insane for me to say that didn't cross my mind, having seen every single movie that we're talking about right now.
And so Jeffrey has another question. What advice would you give to new horror writers who are inspired by your work? You do such an amazing job making narrative decisions, and I wonder what your process for that looks like. Do you have a ton of possibilities and pick the best one, or do great ones just seem to pop up?
Wow, that's a real question, isn't it? Zigzag, I feel like you probably, how do you answer that one, right? Because that's, I mean, in a way it's instinctual, right? In a way you're just running on instincts, and you're like, you feel just like what book should follow Daphne. Now let's go inside the book, Daphne. What moment should follow this one? What beat should follow this one? And there's a musicality to that. There's a rhythm to that. There's a concept album track listing to that. I mean, my advice for any new author, and if this sounds like I'm like the book, the indie rock Tony Robbins, I apologize, but is to get rid of the words good and bad. Just get rid of them. And when you're working on that rough draft, none of those words matter, because like Bird Box got picked up by HarperCollins in 2012. And then I rewrote it again from scratch after that. So it's like, what did they even buy? Like, did they buy the book that came out, right? And the point is, like, to me, the rough draft is proof that you have a book here. And what would you rather have? Like 300 pages that you can fix and find all the things that you're asking about in that question, or no pages at all, right? And I think that I do know some people who get stuck because they're like thinking in terms of like, what is the next exact right thing? Or even, what should this character be called? I've seen people get stuck on character names, and it's like, just give them your name for now. Just give them your mom's name, any placeholder. Just call them, give them a number. One does this, two does this. anything to get through that rough draft, because once you have that, then you can start to see it a little aerial perspective, a little bird's eye view, and then you start to see those moments that you're describing right now, or you're asking about right now. Should this follow this? Should this follow this? Because you're like, now you are listening to the song and fixing it as you go.
Perfect. Perfect response, brother. Yes.
Well, one more question.
Cool.
Ken, I read most of Mallory while camping. It added to the experience as the setting was somewhat rustic, like our campground. Where would you recommend we read Daphne?
Well, that's a fun question. There's a Mallory in a campground. Wow. Daphne, if there's like a playground, or like there was a playground in a park near where Allison and I used to live, and we went there and we were reading it together, Allison and I, and it was freaky to be out under like the lights on a swing set reading about like this clown about town, you know. I would say if there's some sort of public park where you can go where there's enough light, maybe from the restroom area or whatever, there was enough light for you to sit there and read. Oh, especially right now in like autumn, that I think that would be like a peak reading experience.
Justin from Kitchener.
Hi.
Reading each of your books always blows my mind. Being such an avid reader, what are some of the books that have blown your mind lately?
Well, gosh, there's a lot. Recently I did an amazing thing, and Zigzag, if you've ever done this, or maybe you and I can do this one day. Me and a friend started novels at the same time. So we didn't write a book together, but we sent each other every 10,000 words. And it was really cool because you would reach the 10,000 point and then send, you had a friend to send it to. And then you had his, and we were giving each other like these digestible chunks of each other's books. It was really, and you start rooting each other on and blah, blah, blah. His name's Ross Jeffrey, and his book was I Died Too, But They Haven't Buried Me Yet. And his was amazing. And to see it delivered every 10,000 words. And Ross is more, he's a plotter. So he had his like planned out. Okay. But to see like without knowing, you know, I would get 10,000 words, and then the next 10,000 I got like hadn't been written before. That whole experience was truly mind blowing. I'm reading or I just read recently, you know, that guy, Ian Reed, Justin, he wrote, I'm Thinking of Ending Things and Foe, and I'm going to read his newest one, like ASAP, because that dude, I'm really attracted to writers that can like, can keep like, what's the right phrase? Everything's unsettling, but you don't even know why. That thing, like whatever that is. And that's kind of what we were talking about with horror and humor before. It's like that surgical, this dude's doing something that's just unsettling. And that, it blows my mind. He could be talking about, you know, a dude making waffles or like a watering plants in his yard. And you're like, what's about to happen? Oh wait, you're muted. Oh, you got it.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So Brandon says, hi Josh. You mentioned Daphne being a female equivalent of Jason from Friday the 13th. Are there other horror movies that you feel would match the vibe of Daphne?
Yeah. Yeah. Again, I don't know if I think she's a horror equivalent of Jason, but it just crossed my mind while working out, you know. But yeah, okay. But I think there's something a little dirtier about her. Like it strikes me more of like Tourist Trap or The Burning, or there's just something about Daphne that's just a little grimier, you know. And I how do you get grimier than Jason and Freddy? Well, the two of them, I mean, have become like Christmas ornaments, you know. And so the two of them are like Christmas socks now. So I do feel more of like there's something a little bit like when with Daphne, there's a sense of discovering maybe like a slasher or that kind of thing that maybe you hadn't that you didn't know was out there, or something like Tourist Trap, like The Burning. Like I just saw one recently. It was all right. I can't remember the name of that one, but she strikes me as a little bit off center like that. And also, no, I can't say that. That's going to spoil it. Never mind. That's the answer to that. That's the answer to that.
Well, thank you so much. I want to thank Zigzag
Yeah.
for being
Thank
with
you
us.
very much. This was so cool.
Yeah.
He's like, I would love to, Allison, I would love to hang out and go out and get, I don't know if you drink or not or whatever, and talk books and get a beer or whatever.
I will bring my mug of rock and rye. We're on.
Okay. It sounds good. Sounds golden. Sounds good. We would love to, yeah, that was fun talking to you about this stuff and getting to know you in this. And again, you know, us novelists, we should hang out.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm expecting to see some Daphne cosplay at the next cons here in Michigan. So
oh, that'd be so great.
That would be cool. There you go.
Well, my call to action is that Daphne is out and available at Source Booksellers and Source Booksellers Online and in any independent that may be near you. So thank you both so much. And happy book birthday.
Thank you.
This week. I hope you have, a fabulous week and weeks, and that we do well for our reporting for Daphne.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a good
everyone.
evening.
Everybody.
Bye.